Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Once a week, I bring you the State of the States report because of our sponsor, the American Legislative Exchange Council. And a lot goes on in the states, but Jonathan Williams, our friend, who is the president and chief economist as well at ALEC, joins me from inside the Beltway as he keeps an eye on all 50 states. Good Friday to you, Jonathan. How are you?
Well, it has been an incredible week, hasn't it, my friend? What a week in America with the education order and everything else going on.
Well, let's start with the education order. Last night, President Trump signs an executive order on Thursday night saying we're shutting down the Department of Education. Now, you and I both know it's a creature of law, so he cannot do that unilaterally. But what can he do unilaterally, John Williams?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, what the order essentially does is give a nod to that to say we're going to do what we can. And, obviously last week the secretary had made the announcements on the downsizing of some of the FTEs within the department. Lisa Nelson, our CEO, and I and a group were there meeting with the secretary's team this week at the agency. And it was just an incredible meeting to talk about ways that we can, it's more about, I think, shifting the burden of this away from Washington, away from the bureaucracy, and giving states and ultimately parents the opportunity. Because Hugh, you and I have talked about this a lot, where we have seen the education freedom revolution sweep this nation. And ALEC and our partners have been a key part of that. Our legislators leading the way. And just as of a few days ago, we had now 15 states become universal education freedom states across the country. And of course, what this order does is it puts more emphasis on that and the competition and just the ability of states to make those changes to benefit kids at the end of the day and take away some of the unneeded bureaucracy that exists in Washington. And of course, what the order does secondly is it says now to the men and women in Congress, with Speaker Mike Johnson and Leader Thune and others, then you all can take and codify this when it comes to items that need to be handled from congressional oversight.
Now, Jonathan, what's very interesting to me about this is the position it puts Alex in. The American Legislative Exchange Council represents legislators, right? They're state legislators all over this country. I don't know how many thousands of them there are, but the smart ones belong to ALEC. And by the way, if you want to get a weekly newsletter on what's going on at the states, go to alec.org/Hugh, alec.org. It's alec.org, alec.org/Hugh, and they'll send it to you. So you represent legislators. Legislators don't like executive branch people telling them what to do. So I'm wondering if you're hearing from your membership, we're not happy with the idea of governors shutting down agencies that we stood up. Is there a tension here?
I think the overall goal and the sentiment that we get from legislators, or just on the phone with many of them in the last several days, is nearly unanimous support for this idea. And yes, I mean, while there needs to be a robust discussion around balance of powers, both vertical and horizontal federalism, and making sure that the legislative branch ends up having its say, the overall goal of making sure that we get out of this failed approach of doing education at the federal level that was the unfinished business of Ronald Reagan, as you know well, and is now being courageously addressed by Donald Trump and by members in the U.S. House and Senate. Now's the time to reverse course on what has been a failing education bureaucracy for more than 40 years. We have these NAEP scores that just came out, the nation's report card, that show that more than 70% of 8th graders can't do math or reading at grade level. Now, the definition of insanity is doing something over and over again and expecting a different result. So, the method of getting there, I'm sure there'll be some debate around that, but I think the end goal is we want to see states and ultimately parents and families in power.
Well, I think one of the options open to the president and the speaker and Leader Thune is to score the savings from shutting down the Department of Education and attach it to the Budget and Reconciliation and hope it gets past the Senate parliamentarian. Do you think that's what they're going to try and do, Jonathan Williams?
Well, I think they should. I was just talking with Congressman Eric Burleson, one of our 100 members of the current Congress who are ALEC alums, asked him about that question a little bit earlier today on our ALEC Government Efficiency Coalition, and I think he thought that was the right approach as well. It's a common sense approach to say these are real savings. They should be included in any kind of a CBO situation as it relates to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and other things that we need to do to get our fiscal house in order.
Now, what happens to the money that the Department of Education has been sending to the states? Is it just going to be block granted? And you might even want to explain, for the benefit of our Steelers fans, what that means to block grant money.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the money's not going away. What's going away is the bureaucracy. And I think that's the essential part of it, is that you talk to folks at the Department of Education, they cite studies that show upwards of 50% of education spending can be lost in compliance costs. I mean, so if we directly send this to the states in a block grant, like you mentioned, which is something that, in our view, it should be minimal, if any strings attached to it, and allow states to be these laboratories of democracy and innovate. And yes, we might not like all the decisions that states make, but that's okay. And this idea of competitive federalism that we have, if New York and California royally mess up the way that they spend these federal funds, then the taxpayers are going to continue voting with their feet away from those kind of states and go to the freedom-loving states, just like we point out in rich states, poor states every year. So in our perfect, I think, scenario is the dollars stay for education, but they're sent to states without strings to take those dollars and use them for the ability to help parents make those choices for their own children.
Boy, I hope that the leadership is listening, because they could write the reconciliation instructions that way. Well, last question, Jonathan, and again, alec.org/u, alec.org/u, if you want your weekly newsletter on what's going on in the states. Who won the most on the education issues in the states in recent months or in the last year? Where did we really get breakthroughs?
Wall Street Journal this week, Governor Ron DeSantis had a great piece where he cited ALEC research and our index of education freedom and parental empowerment that you can find on our website. Encourage everybody to check that out. Florida's ranked number one in that report for another year. Obviously, it was a leader starting with Jeb Bush way back, but Florida has been the number one ranked state. It's been a state that's continued to stay at the top. But there's a lot of competition at the top, Hugh, and now 15 states are universal states. If you how many states just several years ago, you'd have been at Florida and Arizona. And now we've had 13 others join that because of the work of our ALEC members and so many of our partners across the country. And that is a story that does not get told nearly enough around this town, but it's one that I'm one of the things I'm most optimistic about in the 20 years that I've done this.
We're going to keep talking about it every single week in our State of the State reports. Go get the weekly newsletter at alec.org/u. Find out what's going on in your state. And if you're a state legislator or you know one, they should join ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, alec.org.